49 people got shot in Chicago over the weekend.
Yeah, Memorial Day weekend. Why is it that whenever there is a national holiday, that there is this massive spike in gun-related crimes?
We need to ban national holidays, I guess.
Bringing you law, gospel, and guns. This is Armed Lutheran Radio.
Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Armed Lutheran Radio, a show about guns, hunting, competitive shooting, the natural right of self-defense, and what God's Word says about the issues surrounding gun rights and gun ownership. I'm your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, and this is episode number 315. Thank you so much for making Armed Lutheran Radio a part of your week again this week. For those of you who are new, welcome aboard. Hope you'll stick around. You're going to enjoy it because we are joined again this week by the pistol packing padre himself, Pastor John Bennett. Pastor, welcome back.
Lloyd, it is so good to be back. I wish circumstances in our world were a whole lot better, but
yes,
that's why there's whiskey, I guess.
This is very true. Yes. This is another episode brought to you by Pendleton and ibuprofen. So maybe not a...
Tonight I'm drinking something a little different.
Ooh.
This is called the Gladstone Axe.
Gladstone Axe.
And it's a blended scotch. And I found lately that some of the blended scotches are better than the high dollar stuff.
Between you and the members of the Reformation Gun Club, I'm making quite a list here.
Ah.
For those of you listening who have no idea what that means, you'll have to come to our online hangouts or watch our online hangouts on YouTube. We try to keep things lighthearted as much as we can, although this past week we were discussing weightier issues, but we did set aside a little bit of time to share beverage choices and suggestions. And Dan and Rob are always great for suggestions, and I now have another Gladstone Axe to add to my list. Well, Pastor Bennett was unable to join us for our online hangout last week, so I thought what we would do this week is sit down one-on-one and talk about the gun control debate in the aftermath of the Uvalde, Texas school shooting. But first, I do want to thank the men and women who make this show possible, the members of the Reformation Gun Club. Today, a special shout out to Samuel from Milton, Washington, Anita from Old Fort, Tennessee, William from Bentonville, Arkansas, Jeff from Wisconsin Dells, Wisconsin, Jason from Medina, Ohio, Robert from Bothell, Washington, John Nielsen, Jerry and Billy from Deer Lodge, Montana, Michael from Janesville, Minnesota, and David from Kennesaw, Georgia. Thank you all so much for your support and for your continued contributions during these trying economic times. Folks, Armed Lutheran Radio is listener funded. That means that we rely on the good people who are members of the Reformation Gun Club to keep things going. We don't have any sponsors. We don't have any advertising. This little pitch, this little shout out is as much of an ad as you're going to hear. So if you would like to find out more, if you would like to support the show, find out all the benefits of membership, and get invites to our monthly online hangouts, check it out at armedlutheran.us/gun club, or look for a link in the show notes for this or any of our previous episodes. All right, so I did not even know this was happening. As we are recording this this evening, the President houseplant wandered out somewhere, and I'm not even sure it was the White House. So I don't know where this speech took place because I wasn't going to waste an hour or whatever of my evening listening to it because we know what was going to be said. So Democrats, the media, the president now, entertainers, everybody howling about gun control after this awful school shooting in Uvalde, Texas last week. Before we get into the why and the things that we can actually do to make a difference and to look at some of the proposals. I wanted to get your reaction from what your thoughts were when you first found out about this, when you first heard about it, and what your reaction has been to the past, it's been a week now.
I'm heartbroken. I was sitting, we had gone to the graduation ceremony for the 8th grade students from our local area Lutheran schools. There's 3 Missouri Synod K through 8 schools within a 15-mile area. And here we are getting ready to celebrate these young people, and I pull out my phone because you're there a half hour early, and that's when I read what had happened. And, here we're celebrating the lives of these young people and their accomplishments while we have, blood all over the floors of a 3rd and 4th grade classroom. I'm still having a very difficult time wrapping my head around the decisions that were made on the ground. Even between when you recorded the hangout last week till now, there's been new information that's come out.
So much info. So this guy was a sick loner, like most of them. He posted lots of pics of guns, threatened assault and rape of women online. He posted pictures of a bloody bag of cats, which we assume he killed.
Yes.
He was a high school dropout, living with his grandmother because his family was a wreck. No surprise there. He got into an argument with his grandmother before the shooting and shot her, and then posted about it online before driving to the school. I think I read the grandmother worked at some point or was a teacher's aide or in some capacity worked at that school, part-time maybe, something like this. So sort of like the Newtown thing. Maybe some kind of sick way of punishing his grandmother by going to that school. Red flags up the wazoo, basically. Still, he was able to buy guns and magazines and ammunition. I have no idea where he got the cash to do it, unless he was just stashing every paycheck from Wendy's. I mean, I can't
either that, or it's very likely he could have been involved in the drug trade. That's about the only way a kid that age gets that kind of cash.
Yep.
Either that, or he was stealing from family members. Regardless of what the theories are, I really can't afford 1, let alone 2 Daniel Defense AR-15s. They're not exactly the budget entry level AR-15. And what this all comes down to, I understand to a certain extent the emotional response of, if we would just ban these guns, these kinds of things wouldn't happen, because it's a reaction that comes not from a place of knowledge, but it comes from a place of fear and of anger.
Yep.
But ultimately, there are so many levels on which there were failures within the system. There were reports of police being called out to the residents because of domestic issues between him and his mother.
Right. Which is why I think he was living with the grandmother, right?
Yes. Well, and the mother was a drug addict, so perhaps things weren't taken to the next level because of that. Maybe police just saw a young kid pissed off at his mom for being a junkie.
Right.
Who knows?
Yeah.
But and we can say the same thing about what happened in Parkland. Mm-hmm. If you have a minor who is known to the police for engaging in domestic violence, that should automatically be flagged within the NICS system.
Well, that's one of the things that is, and we're going to talk about red flag laws, and we're going to talk about one of the things I wanted to discuss was, there's the suggestion that somehow we need to change the regulations regarding who can buy a gun and who can't based on domestic violence. we already have domestic violence restraining orders as criterion for whether or not you can buy a gun. But if no domestic, see that maybe that's an area where we have some room to come together on this issue. Is, all right, here's a kid, like you said, who is involved in domestic violence, but he was never flagged because he was never arrested for it or charged for it or had a domestic violence restraining order taken out against him. So he, at no point was he a prohibited person legally.
Right.
And he was able to walk in and buy 2 guns on his 18th birthday.
Right. Just like with Parkland.
Just like Parkland. The similarities to Parkland are really everything from the home situation to the kid's social life to the police response is so eerily similar to Parkland.
Yes, it is. And this nation really needs to wake up when it comes to the mental health and the behavioral issues that should be clear indicators that this is a person who needs help.
Yes.
Imagine how, first of all, this would have never happened if someone in this young man's life said, this person is clearly disturbed and they need help.
Yeah.
He was, it talks about how he was bullied tremendously.
Right.
How, with COVID, you have the isolation, which has been an issue for many people within his age group.
Oh, yeah.
This was someone who needed a great deal of help.
Yeah.
What it comes down to, it sounds like this is a person who felt like no one gave a damn about him. And look what happened now. What I find deeply disturbing is at the same time, while all of this is happening, the same day this takes place, did you hear what the California State Assembly did?
Yes, I did. I forgot to mention that or to put that on the list to discuss. Yes, it's horrible.
Yes. Yeah, basically what, for those who aren't aware, they eliminated the requirement of mandatory reporting of the kinds of behaviors this young man exhibited. So that, even if a student assaults a teacher, they were going to say you are no longer mandated to report that to authorities.
Right. Direct threats of violence against school staff
Yes.
or teachers is no
Yes.
longer to be reported to law enforcement. Or at least it's not mandatory any longer,
Yes.
which means they won't do
didn't
it.
prohibit you from reporting. Yeah, they didn't prohibit you from reporting, but how many of these cases where you have some punk kid who mouths off to his teacher and the teacher just doesn't want to bother reporting it because they don't want to deal with the hassle of talking to police and being tied up for a couple of hours for a police report and that sort of thing.
Or the teacher may want to report it and the school system doesn't.
Right.
They don't want the bad press. They don't want to have to deal with it. There's the whole, that harkens back to the Trayvon Martin thing. Remember, his school system had some sort of a program to try to what they call end the school to prison pipeline. So they weren't reporting to law enforcement.
Yeah. And that's another aspect of this is depending on the skin color of the student, if it's a troubled student, you could have a white teacher in a black school that says, well, I don't want to report this because I don't want to get labeled a racist.
That's the environment that we've created in our society.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
But there were so many failures in this attack. You've got obviously the background checks not working. We know the school was not secure. And he may have known that because, as I said earlier, I think his grandmother worked there at that school in some capacity. So he may have been familiar with the fact that, hey, nobody's going to stop me. There's no armed staff. That was by ISD policy, by the way. That was not just, The ISD does not permit firearms on campus by anyone but law enforcement. So but on top of that, there's no armed resource officer. on staff or on campus either. I think there's one in the entire district. So obviously he can't be at every school all the time. The indications are that he got in through an unlocked door. There were reports, of course, and I have seen conflicting reports that say that it was left propped open by someone who forgot to close it. I don't know. Like I said, I've seen conflicting reports. And the police response, of course, as you mentioned, was absolutely atrocious, just like Parkland. Like we've learned nothing since Parkland.
There was an interview that was in People magazine, of all things, of one of the officers that was there on scene. And based on the interview, it gave the impression that there was a sense of rising mutiny there among the officers, because there was a number of officers that were getting ready to say, F this, we're going in.
Right.
And imagine being one of the officers on scene being told you cannot go in there as you hear shots being fired. And the Border Patrol...
And it took a Border Patrol agent whose wife
yes.
worked there and had kids in that school.
Yep. And the team, and it was a team that was a combination of Border Patrol agents, and I think it was U.S. Marshals. I can't remember the combination, but of course the Border Patrol agents were part of it. A group which, by the way, people like AOC want to see completely dissolved.
Yes.
And from what I read, they also defied the orders of the commanding officer on scene, who had told them that they were not permitted to go in. One of the Border Patrol agents that went in, one of his grandchildren was killed in that that massacre. So imagine being one of the men who goes in there only to find your granddaughter dead.
And if it had not been for those guys who basically said to the police who were there, you're not our boss, we're going. I mean, the guy who ended up killing the shooter heard about it from a text message from his wife, who was inside the school, was sitting in a barber chair getting his hair cut when he got the text message, jumped up, hair not finished, like half cut, grabbed the barbershop owner's shotgun and went straight to the school.
Wow, I hadn't heard that part of it. Yeah.
While all the other officers, the police were standing there doing nothing. So this is...
Well, they weren't doing nothing. and I'm not saying this to be down on law enforcement. The 99.999% of law enforcement officers are the cream of the crop. But when you have officers that are putting cuffs on parents and pepper spraying them because the parents want to go in and save their kids.
Right. Yeah. That's... Clearly, the Uvalde Police Department was not prepared for anything remotely like this.
No.
Which is scary, considering that, what we thought we had learned after Parkland are lessons that we didn't learn. No, certainly not everywhere. Obviously not in Uvalde. And so one can assume that there are more places around the country that would react poorly to an incident like this because they don't know how to handle it. So the response politically is the one that I want to focus on next, because obviously the president's speech he's made, obviously he's calling for certain things to be done. And we've heard those calls from media types, from the news, from politicians almost immediately after. Beto O'Rourke dancing in the blood of those kids before they'd even processed that scene. Although props to the mayor of Uvalde for calling him a sick son of a bitch to his face in front of a crowd, for coming to that press conference to scream and yell at the governor. So
that was being overly polite, if you ask me.
Yes. I thought that was I thought the mayor was going to come off the stage, to be honest. He did not take kindly to Mr. O'Rourke. So I saw this comic yesterday, not funny haha comic, but it was a comic strip that I think summed up where we are every time one of these things happens. And it's a comic called Circle and Square. And basically it's not like visual humor. It is a conversation about, or between these two characters, two sets of ideas. One of the characters is a circle. It's just a simple circle, and the other one is a square. And the square, obviously, is, as it makes sense, is the anti-gun guy. And Square says, in response to the latest tragedy, we need to do something, right? We need to do this thing that I have always wanted to do. And if you don't want to do it, you are okay with kids getting killed.
Yeah.
And Circle responds, well, why do something? Why not do something that will help? And Square responds, no, we don't need to do that. We need to do what I've always wanted to do. We don't have time to discuss it. And if you want to discuss it, you're okay with kids getting killed. So Circle says, all right, what is it you want to do? And Square finally admits, I want to repeal the Bill of Rights. To which Circle says no, and Square calls him a monster. That's where we are in this country. It's a perfect summary in this one little cartoon, because politicians have this playbook, this same old set of ideas that they've always wanted to do. And whenever there's a tragedy, they just bring it right back out without changing it, without discussion, the guy from Connecticut pathetically mewling on the floor of the Senate, begging Republicans to join him to do something to do anything. That's not what we elected these morons to do. We elected them to solve problems, not to just do something. And
oftentimes doing something just creates more problems.
Yes, exactly. They won't consider any actual solutions. They won't consider whether their ideas will actually make anything better. And if you don't go along, you have blood on your hands. If you're a member of the NRA, if you're a gun owner, if you oppose so-called gun safety legislation, you are as bad as that murderer.
Yeah. They want to... And that comic that you described really sums it up beautifully, because ultimately they want to use this as fodder for doing what they have always wanted to do, which is to disarm the populace.
Yep.
And the proof is in the pudding, so to speak. I know this was mentioned in the online hangout, but Columbine took place right in the middle. It was practically at the very middle point of that 10-year span of the Brady gun ban.
Yep.
Demonstrating that everything that they are trying to push through doesn't work. And of course, I can't remember the episode. We did talk about this at some point in the past, and I believe this was early on in the history of the show, that at some point they were going to be coming after ammunition in general. And that really, I believe that when Biden was talking about how the 9mm round blows lungs right out of the body,
can't be any stupider when it comes to gun.
Well, and honestly, I don't think it was out of stupidity or ignorance that he said that. I believe they're going after ammunition. They tried this before, and there are states where they have been doing this already. In California, they made it illegal to purchase any ammunition unless it was done through a gun dealer, and you had to have a photo ID. That ID had to be recorded and everything. You're limited to the amount that you can purchase within a particular span of time.
Right.
Everything is reported with your ammunition purchases to the state. And it is illegal to bring ammunition into the state of California if you've purchased it outside of California. That's how crazy it's gotten with the laws in California.
And
but if you
remember back, and you're right. Remember back to when the Brady bill was passed and the first assault weapons ban was passed, there was all this freak out over cop killer bullet, remember? So yeah, you may be right. He's going back to that old, that old hyperbole. Let's scare people to death about how horrible a 9mm is, because, and if the 9mm is horrible and it's the most common caliber in use by far around the country for all uses, self-defense, competition, plinking, home defense, police work, that's next.
And they tried this, and of course it was done under the guise of the EPA. If you remember, this is maybe
was
10
it the
years
lead
ago.
thing?
Yes, where they were, and I don't know if anything was changed, and I'm trying to remember the specifics of it, but it was heavily regulating the use of lead in ammunition. And it created a shortage of ammunition that was, I don't remember, again, this is long enough ago that I don't remember the specifics. Maybe I'm just getting old. I don't know.
We all are.
Yes. But it had something to do with the manufacture of lead bullets. And I don't remember if it was regulations related to exposure to the workers who are making the ammunition or what. But they were trying to ban use of lead in ammunition altogether.
Well, and
obviously it didn't take, but that was their backhanded attempt at banning ammunition, or at least a large portion of ammunition in the United States.
well, and some form of regulation was enacted, because I know that lead mitigation is a huge expense for gun ranges,
yes, it is.
even outdoor gun ranges. So
Not my gun range.
no,
That's my backyard, if anybody's wondering.
lucky. Oh, to have a range in my backyard again. Anyway, so the left keeps saying they know what works, which is funny, because if they did, they wouldn't be pushing these ideas.
Yeah. It's the equivalent of saying that seat belts prevent auto accidents.
Yeah, exactly. And they keep citing the assault weapons ban in the 90s, and we know good and well that had, there were actual scientific studies, government studies, that proved that had negligible effects on violence in this country.
I would go so far as to say it had deleterious effects, because there was an actual increase in violent crime during that 10-year span that subsided after the gun ban expired.
Well, and you already had, going into the ban, you already had a trend of violence on the decline, and that only continued coming out of the ban. So can you really say that the ban made any difference? No. And so so it's disingenuous on their part to claim that they know what works based on that, because that's debatable. But
Right. And if you look at the data, you could easily argue that it only made things worse regarding violent crime.
Yep.
Yeah.
So for those who missed our previous shows on these topics, I thought we would do a recap on some of these ideas that are being put forward and why they are nonsense, and why we believe that they're not worth pursuing, because they don't actually solve the problems. The first and most obvious silliness is universal background checks. The shooter in this case passed a background check, as we said. So, as we've seen in other cases, this system that we have doesn't really work as a deterrent to mass killers as it stands. Most mass killers are flying under the radar. They're not in the background check system. They typically have not been, even if they have done stuff, they haven't been reported.
Right.
So they're typically not, they're not already on the radar. They're not, well, they maybe have been kind of on the radar, but they're not convicted felons. They're not illegal immigrants. they're not they haven't been declared mentally ill or committed or treated for mental health issues. That applies to Uvalde, Parkland, Las Vegas, Buffalo, El Paso, Dayton. So many more fit that profile. They're not in the system because they haven't done anything to get in the system yet.
Or they have, and criminal justice reform has ignored it.
Right. Sutherland Springs, Charleston, those guys should have been prohibited, but their convictions and their mental health records were never submitted to the NICS system.
Right.
So they passed background checks. So if you've got garbage data in the system, it doesn't matter whether you've got background checks. It's not going to catch or stop anyone. And in the case of all the gang-related mass shootings that they now count as mass shootings, you remember we used to count only the guys who went and shot random people. Now we count any shooting that has more than 4 victims, even if it's a drug-related thing or gang-related. It still counts as a mass shooting.
By their data, there are more mass shootings with a higher body count in the city of Chicago on a monthly basis than what happened in Uvalde.
Well, 49 people got shot in Chicago over the weekend.
Yeah, Memorial Day weekend. Why is it that whenever there is a national holiday, that there's this massive spike in gun-related crimes?
We need to ban national holidays, I guess.
I guess, yeah. It's
so, but in those cases, those shooters don't acquire their guns legally, so background checks don't help. No background check was ever done. The majority of those crime guns are stolen, as we've said many, many times. They're either stolen or they're acquired from friends or family. They're not going out to gun stores or to gun shows and buying guns. So background checks don't matter in that case. And that's the vast majority of the gun violence in this country.
It's like they're saying, hey, let's trust the government to protect us because they have such a great track record for the past.
Yeah.
And this issue of universal background checks, let's talk frankly about what they mean by that.
The universal part is the key.
Yes, and what they really mean, and this was the case with, I think this was a law that was passed in Oregon, that anytime, for example, my daughter, she shot trap last spring, and if you merely were to loan someone your firearm, these laws would require you to go through a background check process to loan your firearm to someone else.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's considered a felony.
Go to a 4-H shooting competition, a shotgun competition, and they've got to do background checks on all of the competitors before they let them use a gun.
And that's what they want to do, is anytime it's changing hands, even if it's temporarily, they want to require you to fill out a Form 4473, get the background check, and everything else, which financially creates a great burden upon firearm owners, just if they want to let their kids shoot trap even.
But it also assumes that people are just going to go out and obey the law because not there. Having that law in place doesn't mean people can't go buy guns or sell their guns without getting a background check. It just means that if you get caught after the fact, they will throw a paperwork crime at you.
Yeah.
Which is useless because half the time they're not prosecuting the people who are actually committing violent crimes, much less, tacking on a couple of years for failing to fill out a 4473 or something, or not getting a background check. That the idea that that's going to stop people, or that's going to save lives by stopping people and keeping people from getting guns, is kind of naive.
It is. These laws, the only ones who are really going to obey these laws are law-abiding citizens.
Right.
And at some point, you're going to have law-abiding citizens who are going to say, the heck with this. this law is a violation of the Second Amendment, I am going to look at the Second Amendment as that which defines my rights, rather than this law that's just designed to disarm me.
Yeah, and if I know this guy who wants to buy my gun, the heck with this. I'm going to go ahead and sell it to him. I'm not saying that I'm not suggesting breaking the law. What I'm saying here is that people at some point are just going to be like, why do I have to do this? This isn't prohibiting me, or this isn't actually physically. It's not like the background check when you walk into a gun store, right? Because when you go to the counter and try to pay and they say, okay, let's do the background check. Well, if you can't pass the background check, or if you don't want to do the background check, you walk away. Now, what they're talking about is inserting the government into private transactions, which they're not actively monitoring. So there's no way for this to actually prevent people from getting guns if they really want to.
And all it really does, and of course this is their goal, is to create a broader register of who the firearm owners are in the United States.
Yeah, because the only way this works is you have to have a registry.
Yeah, and there was a story that came out the beginning of this year sometime that there was a whistleblower that the ATF was actually tracking and recording these purchases, creating a de facto registry without the knowledge of buyers.
They are requiring gun stores when they close to turn over their books with their records of sales and all their 4473 data to the ATF. Yes.
Yeah. And, this universal background check law, all it's going to do, so for myself, and I'm sure the same is with you and many of our listeners, I have bought and sold and traded firearms with friends, and I probably can't even list the number of firearms that I've bought or sold or traded between friends.
Yeah.
It's numerous. I mean, I probably could sit down and make a record if I really wanted to. So what's going to happen is people are going to say, okay, I'm going to write you out a bill of sale, and I'm going to post date it previous to the passage of this law. Right. That way we don't have to worry about it.
We're good.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, people will get creative to get around it. And that doesn't even take into account the fact that none of these mass killers got their guns from private transfers. None of them.
Right. None of them got them either from manufacturing one of those scary ghost guns that we're hearing so much about these days.
Yeah. They walk into a gun store, they pass a background check, and they walk out with more expensive guns than I can possibly own.
Yeah.
While working at Wendy's. So even if you get the background checks, even if the background check is required, it wouldn't have stopped, even if we had that law in place, the universal part, it wouldn't have had any effect on any of our past mass shooters, Uvalde all the way back, because all of them, I can't say all of them because there are some I'm not thinking of, I'm sure, but none of them, as far as I know, got their guns through legal private transfers that didn't go through a background check. I mean, you get Santa Fe, Texas school shooter, he stole the guns from his parent. Newtown, he stole the gun from his parent. As far as I know, most everything else in between, they passed background check because they went to a gun store and bought their guns legally.
Right. Yeah, there is no law that could be passed that would prevent these kinds of things from happening, because ultimately what it comes down to, even if you were to ban the purchase of all firearms, we have, at this moment, at a minimum 400 million firearms that are in the hands of private individuals in this country.
And that doesn't even count the ones that we don't know about that are in the hands of criminals.
Right. Exactly. And so those who are intent on taking the lives of innocent children are going to find a way to do it. It's just like the argument that, we wouldn't have as many suicides if people didn't own guns. That's BS, because you look at Japan, which has one of the highest suicide rates in the country or in the world. And what is the common means by which people commit suicide in that country?
Hanging.
By ingesting chemicals.
Ingesting chemicals and hanging, yes.
Yes. So,
and in Africa, where they have astronomical suicide rates, it's ingesting, I think, like farm fertilizer and that kind of stuff. So, I mean, those people aren't people who are determined to kill themselves are going to find a way. And the background
Yes.
and the suggestion too that the background checks, we've seen this suggestion before too, that somehow this would prevent suicides. The majority of people who are killing themselves, the majority of the quote unquote gun violence in this country is suicide. It's like 60 some odd %.
yes. Yeah, at least.
And of those that are done with firearms, of the suicides that are committed with firearms, those are not people who, by and large, are not people going out and buying a gun specifically to kill themselves. They already own the gun.
And perhaps I was getting a little bit off track where I was going with that. But just as a ban on firearms isn't going to lower the suicide rate, neither is the ban on firearms going to lower the incidence of mass murder. Even if you took all the firearms out of the hands of every individual in this country, there are plenty of cases internationally where weapons like machetes have been used to slaughter dozens of people by one individual.
Mm-hmm.
Those who are intent on committing an act of unspeakable evil are going to do so regardless of whatever weapon they have at their disposal.
And getting back to the idea of banning AR-15s before we look at one other quick idea. We've got the only way that banning guns in any form actually fixes things is if you ban them all and you confiscate them in mass.
Yes,
and
starting with the gangbangers.
And there's simply no way to do that since we don't know how many gangbanger guns. I mean, when the gangbanger at the local crack house is passing, is passing out yeet cannons to his enforcers, we don't know about that. So if you ban guns and confiscate them, you're only taking them from the law-abiding people who are willing to give them up.
Right.
Right? So that leaves guns in the hands of the bad people to begin with. So there's one problem. But you also have the problem of law enforcement as it is got their hands full in this country with the way this society has gone and the way it's turned against police and the way it basically coddles criminals. I can't see that they have much stomach for going door to door to confiscate 300 million guns.
Right. Especially when you have many of these law enforcement officers that take seriously their oath to uphold the Constitution.
Right. We've seen a number of states and a number of law enforcement agencies who basically said, forget it, our officers are not going to be going to door to take your guns if they pass something in Congress. It's not going to happen. But even if they pass this, even if they ban these things, even if they ban guns, they're not going to get them out of the hands of the people who are likely to use them wrongly. You're not going to be able to confiscate them because that's just a nightmare. You could try something like a buyback, which was something that Hillary Clinton suggested was something we should consider. Remember that during the campaign a couple of campaigns back? That was probably a bad idea on her part. But the idea of a buyback has all kinds of problems because first off, it wrongly assumes that the government's buying something back that belonged to it in the first place, which it doesn't. So,
and can they pass a background check, especially if you think of the Fast and Furious fiasco?
Right. We just gave $40 or $70 billion worth of weapons to the Taliban. I'm not sure that the government deserves to pass a background check.
Yeah.
But to buy back everybody's guns means that the only way that works is the threat of force to require the transaction, right? You're going to go to jail if you don't sell us your gun.
Right. And where is aside from just printing the money as they are known to do, where's the government going to come up with the funds to buy, quote unquote, buy back
Right.
these firearms?
We're $30 trillion in debt.
Yes. If I had to tabulate the value of combined of my firearms and the ammunition that I have, and I have less than many gun owners. I know I have more than many, but I also have quite a bit less than many. Does the government intend to spend trillions of dollars to buy back firearms?
Well, that's just
to
it.
pay for the investment that these law-abiding citizens have engaged in?
They're not going to reimburse you commensurate with what you spent.
No.
So that's confiscation without compensation, and that's a violation of the Fifth Amendment, right?
Yep.
Yes. Can't take property away from law-abiding citizens without, what's the word, just compensation, right?
Just compensation, yes. As well as a violation of due process, because in essence, what these gun buybacks are doing is treating us as common criminals who are being reimbursed for the purchases that they made.
Yep. We're assuming you're going to at some point
have a right to purchase that, so we're going to pay you back for what you paid so that you don't feel quite so bad about us violating your Second Amendment rights.
Here's a $200 grocery card. And hand over that Daniel Defense AR-15.
Right.
So
it would certainly boost the sale of High Point.
It certainly would. All right, so this last proposal that Biden brought up, he said if we can't ban AR-15s, let's at least raise the age to where it's legal to buy them. Now, this has been bandied about before, and I got to admit I'm open to this discussion because of all these proposals. This is the only one that would have had any kind of an impact, whatever impact it would have had on some of these mass shootings. Obviously, the Parkland shooter, the shooter in Uvalde, they're both 18, I think. The Parkland guy was 19 when he committed the act. I think he was 18 when he bought his rifle.
Right.
They were legally able to buy a long gun. It's been suggested that the age be raised to 21. So the reason I say I'm open to a discussion is because if that law had been in place, it would have at least been some sort of an impediment to at least those two shooters, maybe more, who bought their guns under the age of 21. Now, where I think you and I probably agree that there's a problem is that there's a lot of things you can do under the age of 21 that are destructive in many other ways. And
right.
If we're going to raise the age for a rifle, then we need to discuss some of these other things.
Not to mention, pardon me for talking about the elephant in the room, but last time I checked, somebody who's willing to shoot a bunch of children in cold blood, if they couldn't legally buy that AR-15, boy, I just know for sure they certainly would feel terrible about finding an illegal way of buying that AR-15.
Guess I'm just going to have to wait 3 years to kill all those kids.
Yes. So it's, again, when someone is willing to do something so depraved and evil, there is no law that you're going to pass that is going to stop them.
Yep.
The only thing that can possibly stop something like this from happening is if there is intervention when the warning signs first present themselves.
Yes. Yeah. And the only way that an age limit on firearms works is if you're going to then make it illegal to attempt to purchase a firearm under 21, and you're going to actually go arrest somebody for trying, which we know they're not going to do because people are denied. There are denials for background checks, right? That the people go to the store, they're legally not allowed to buy a gun, and they go in anyway. It doesn't happen all that often, it doesn't happen as often as they try to suggest from the number of denials. But some of the denials every year are people who are really shouldn't be or not permitted to buy a gun. We don't go prosecute those people.
Right.
So raising the age, all you're doing is say, don't do that, and hope that they don't go find some other way.
Yeah.
There's no teeth in this unless you're going to put together a law that says we're going to put you in jail for trying. Then I don't see how this works.
And again, with a law like that, all it's going to do again is to turn these people to look at illegal means to acquire their firearms.
Yeah, because they won't even if you do make it so that, okay, you try to buy a gun under 21, we're going to arrest you, then they're not even going to try. They're going to go straight to the illegal market.
Right.
Or steal a gun or something like that. But
and the message that this sends to people in law enforcement and the military, that you're old enough to die for your country,
carrying a gun that you're not
to die
legal.
in the line of duty, but but we don't trust you to buy this for your personal use.
Yes, only at work.
Yes, despite the fact that when the Second Amendment was written, that you had 14-year-olds who had died defending their right to liberty against the British.
Yes. So we have a strange idea. I mean, we have all these limitations on what you can and can't do at certain ages. And it's all this idea that until you are a certain age, you're not fully an adult. But the ages are all over the place. And so you're an adult enough in this situation, but you're not an adult in this situation, which really makes no sense.
Yes.
So if we're going to discuss raising the age of what is essentially adulthood, is what we're talking about here, then we need to talk about some other things. Because raising the age to get a driver's license will save a lot more lives than raising the age to buy a long arm.
I have a perfect example of just how stupid and backwards this reasoning is. What was the age of consent, say, 20 years ago?
Oh, yeah.
It was 18.
Yep.
Universally, it was 18. That once you were 18, you were considered old enough to consent to have intercourse. Most states, that has been lowered to 16. So now we're saying at the age of 16, you are emotionally mature enough to make the decision to have sexual intercourse with whomever you choose, but you're not emotionally mature enough to purchase and own a firearm.
Right. You can engage in intercourse and conceive a child and go get it aborted, but you're not old enough to go buy a firearm to, if you decide to marry that girl you got pregnant and keep that baby and you want to protect them, you can't. That makes no sense to me.
Right.
You can, and the age to vote is 18, thanks to the 26th Amendment. So I would suggest that it would be a good thing not to lower that age, but to raise it. Let's put that to 21 as well. You can serve on it.
If you can't buy cigarettes, if you can't buy alcohol, and if you can't purchase a firearm until you're 21 years old, then you shouldn't be allowed to vote.
And you shouldn't be allowed to serve on a jury because that's 18 as well.
Yeah.
I mean, how can an 18-year-old listen to arguments in a jury trial and vote in a trial that might result in someone losing their liberty or potentially their life as a result of the verdict? You can do that at 18, but you can't buy a gun.
You can get a license to drive an 18-wheeler at the age of 18.
Yeah, and remember how many people did that truck driver kill that they sentenced to 110 million years? What?
Oh, yeah.
Where? I don't remember. That was, and we're always constantly here in Texas, we're having massive pileups involving, I'm not saying it's 18-year-old truck drivers, don't get me wrong.
Right.
But that you're going to drive, a monster truck and all of the trailer behind it at 18, but you can't own a firearm to protect yourself.
Right.
You can't even serve in Congress until you're age 30. So what does that say? If they don't think you're smart enough, you're mature enough to be a legislator until you're 30, why do they think at 18 you can make these other momentous, monumental decisions in your life?
Well, I think AOC is definitive proof that even at 30, a person isn't necessarily mature.
Very true. Very true. Yeah.
Yeah. There is no rhyme or reason to this, because ultimately what it comes down to is the only thing that the left cares about is whatever is politically expedient to them in the present.
Yeah.
Which is why you have a-holes like Beta Male O'Rourke standing on the corpses of dead children, politically grandstanding in order to have some sort of political advantage, even though he's too much of an idiot to realize that all it did was make him look like the a-hole that he is.
He thinks that by grandstanding in front of the governor, that it will improve his chances of unseating the governor in November.
Yeah.
Good luck with that. All right, folks, I'm going to cut in here and say that is all for this week. We sat down to record this episode, and it ended up being more than 90 minutes. And I made an executive decision that rather than release one gigantic episode or do a lot of editing and leave a lot of really good content on the cutting room floor, I have separated this show out into 2 episodes. So be sure to tune in next week, where we are going to discuss the why of these mass shootings and what we can actually do that would make a difference, as opposed to the things we discussed in today's episode. So be sure to check that out again. That'll be next week, episode 316. Thank you all for listening. If you have any questions or any comments about anything that we discussed here today, please leave us a comment at the feedback page at armedlutheran.us/feedback. We'd love to hear from you. Be sure to join us next week for episode 316 as we continue this discussion. Have a great week. Keep shooting, keep praying, and I'll talk to you next time.
John Bennett is the pastor at St. John's Lutheran Church in Willow Creek, Minnesota. For more information, visit stjohnswillowcreek.org. For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.us. Check out the Facebook page, The Armed Lutheran, or join our Facebook group, Fans of Armed Lutheran Radio. If you like what you hear, please leave us a comment on our feedback page at armedlutheran.us/feedback, or a review on iTunes, and let us know what you think. Thank you for listening to Armed Lutheran Radio, a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network.